The reason why the price of gas is going up is not because of steps the president has taken.
A no-fly zone has become a catchphrase. I'm not sure a lot of people fully understand what that means.
He never did it during my time, John, you know.
No.
Have you been to the pump lately? Gas prices are overwhelmingly expensive. And guess what? They're not expected to go down anytime soon. What that has to do with foreign oil, we'll tell you coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
Might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually their name, Jobob.
Ooh, live! Back from the dingy bunker from a tax-deductible business vacation that I took. We're back here in the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. On today, it is March 7th, the year of our Lord 2022. Have you seen gas prices? I don't want to make too much light about this, but holy cow, it's crazy and it's almost comical if it weren't so painful for my pocket. We'll talk about why that's happening, and it's going to continue to happen throughout this episode. Actually, we got a pretty decently laid out episode with Russia, no-fly zone and how the world is responding, and then gas prices, kind of just a flowing. All of this is connected, by the way, so it's interesting. But I wanted to start off with this. You saw that clip earlier in the intro of the show, but Trump was on the phone. Well, back up. Russia's crazy. Ukraine's crazy. There's a lot of crazy stuff flying around. It's hard to distinguish what's true, what's not true. It's all nuts. What would have happened if Trump was reelected? What wouldn't have happened? All of that stuff. There's polls out that show what Americans think of what would have happened if Trump were reelected in 2020 and still in office. We'll get to some of those polls, but I wanted to play this clip. We'll start it off on a not funnier note, but fun note. This is Donald Trump on the phone, on speakerphone with golfer John Daly. They're buddies. They hang out. They play golf. Daly was in some clubhouse somewhere on speakerphone with the former president of the United States talking about Russia, Ukraine. What he said was actually super interesting. We play this clip for you, and we'll discuss on the other side. If you have any comments on this video, if you've already seen it, let me know in the comment section. See if we can get some comments as soon as we play this. Check this out. This is, again, John Daly, golfer, former golfer, Donald Trump on speakerphone. Somebody recorded it, and it is hilarious. Watch this.
Praise them. Yeah.
They're all saying, oh, he's a nuclear power. It's like they're afraid of him. You know, he was a friend of mine. I got along great with him. I say, Vladimir, if you do it, we're hitting Moscow. I said, we're going to hit Moscow. And he sort of believed me, like 5%, 10%. That's all you need. He never did it during my time, John, you know.
No.
We're all talking about it.
No, it's
Why
funny.
did he do this during the last 4 years? Because he knew he couldn't.
It's funny how she didn't bother you either.
Yeah, no, she didn't bother me. I told him the same thing. That'll be next.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be next. Taiwan will be next. You won't have any computer chips. They'll blow them off the face of the earth. Yeah. You won't have a
So if you're just joining, I know I saw a couple hundred of you jump on during that clip. That was President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, talking on speakerphone with golfer John Daly. And I think the most interesting thing that he said in that phone call is what we kind of all assume had a little bit of truth, but actually way more truth than we may have first given it credit for. On the phone call, if you didn't hear it, the audio is kind of fuzzy. President Trump said, I told Vladimir Putin, if you go into Ukraine, we're hitting Moscow. And then he acknowledged that Putin looked at him like, maybe he believed it. Maybe he believed 5, 10%. That's all you need. And left it at that. So it is kind of interesting that the president, Donald Trump, former president, realized the power of his, what's a nice way to put this? Unpredictability. The inability to predict Donald Trump, in a lot of ways, is what kept a lot of people safe during his tenure as president of the United States. There's been a lot of speculation out there on whether or not he knew what he was doing as the president in foreign policy versus kind of just flying by the seat of his pants. A lot of stuff out there. Nobody's ever going to know. But in this phone call, again, it's kind of an offhanded on speakerphone in the middle of a clubhouse with a golfing buddy. In this phone call, he kind of lays it out there and says, look, he believed me 5-10%. And I knew that. And that's all it took. That's all it took. And interestingly enough, maybe that is all it took. Because while the anti-Trump crowd was consistently saying, well, he's mean on Twitter, he's chaos, who knows what he's going to do, that whole idea of who knows what he's going to do, in a lot of ways kept Americans safe, both here and abroad, and kept other countries safe because other world leaders like Vladimir Putin, like Xi Jinping, like Erdogan, like Lukashenko, like all of these other world leaders who led countries didn't really do much because of the idea of, I don't know what that guy's going to do. Now we have a president who it seems pretty evidently clear what he's going to do at all times, which is pretty much dang near nothing. Or what's the craziest out there lefty policy that he can state? That's what he's going to do. So the idea of an unpredictable stance on the world stage, especially coming from the president of the United States, especially on Twitter, which he's no longer anymore, that's a whole other thing, possibly kept a lot of people around the world safe. And it's interesting that President Trump acknowledges that and knew that. Hey, man, you don't know what I'm going to do. Even if you only believe 5%, that's all you need. So a new Harvard Center for American Political Studies, Harvard-Harris poll survey released Friday found some interesting information. This is fascinating. If you haven't already, click the little like button, little comment button. This is, again, Harvard Center, Harvard-Harris poll released Friday regarding President Trump in office versus President Biden in office. It's fascinating to see what the American people think. If you haven't already, click the like button, little share button. It really, really helps us out. Really appreciate it because people need to hear this sort of thing. A new Harvard Center for American Political Studies Harris poll released Friday found that 62% of those polled believe Putin would not be moving against Ukraine if President Trump had still been in office. This is from The Hill, by the way. When looking strictly at the answers of Republicans and Democrats, 85% of Republicans and 38% of Democrats answered that way. However, 38% of Americans polled believed that Putin would have invaded Ukraine even if Trump had been president. So that's a pretty interesting statistic there. 62% of Americans think, yeah, if President Trump was in office, Putin probably wouldn't have invaded another country for the exact examples and exact reasons why we just talked about. You didn't really know what he was going to do. And you only needed to be a little bit scared of chaos to not incite chaos. But that's a pretty substantial number. 62% of Americans. That is no small number. 2/3 of Americans, believe that Putin would not have moved on Ukraine had President Trump been in office. I want to talk. So as long as we're talking Ukraine, Russia, there's been a swell of ground support for instituting a no-fly zone. This is from Reuters. A broad bipartisan majority of Americans think the United States should stop buying Russian oil and gas and work with NATO to set up no-fly zones to protect Ukraine from Russian airstrikes. I have some thoughts about this. Well, briefly and quickly, no, let's not do that. Especially right now. Setting up a no-fly zone is essentially an act of war if you ever have to defend that no-fly zone. Ukrainian President Zelensky for the last week has been begging NATO and the UN and countries within the UN and big powerful governments to institute or help him institute a no-fly zone for Russian pilots over Ukrainian airspace. What that would do is disallow Russian planes from flying over Ukraine, which is a problem. I'll explain a little bit more of this and then kind of the polling behind this. Actually, you know what? Let's read some stats first. Again, this is coming from America. Then Marco Rubio on George Stephanopoulos' show over the weekend had a pretty interesting point that I wanted to nail really quick. Poll conducted Thursday and Friday suggests that U.S. Outrage is growing over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I'm not sure how much we want to get into this whole propaganda deal. There's been a lot of people on the right, some pretty big name people on the right, talking about wartime propaganda coming out of Ukraine. That's all happening. That is all real. And also, Ukraine has every reason to be pushing it. Can't really blame them for doing it. They're putting out a bunch of state media, independent media saying we're, well, as much as they can, trying to exaggerate the situation. American media is lazy. We know that. American media is made up of a bunch of 22-year-old journalists who don't fact-check things or look into things very much. That's just the reality of the situation, and they're parroting a lot of the Ukrainian propaganda, whatever you want to call it. The reporting and the repetition of that, I don't necessarily know is propaganda. I think it's lazy journalism. Some of my friends on the right disagree with me, and that's fine. That's just what I see. All of that is to say that there is a change in the attitudes of Americans and people around the world, which is potentially problematic. This poll conducted Thursday, Friday, outrage is growing. It is no clear respondents. It was not clear if respondents supported a no-fly zone, were fully aware of the risk of conflict that would cause. However, some 74% of Americans, including majority of Republicans and Democrats, said the United States and its allies in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, should impose a no-fly zone in Ukraine, the poll found. So, 74% of Americans think, geez, 3/4 of Americans think that the American forces should work with NATO to institute a no-fly zone in Ukraine. I want to play this clip from Marco Rubio with Stephanopoulos, kind of explaining what that actually means. Check this out.
Are you and your colleagues now more open to a no-fly zone?
You know, look, a no-fly zone has become a catchphrase. I'm not sure a lot of people fully understand what that means. That means flying AWACS 24 hours a day. That means the willingness to shoot down and engage Russian airplanes in the sky. That means, frankly, you can't put those planes up there unless you're willing to knock out the anti-aircraft systems that the Russians have deployed, and not just in Ukraine, but in Russia and also in Belarus. So basically, a no-fly zone, if people understood what it means World War III. It means starting World War III. So I think there are a lot of things we can do to help Ukraine protect itself, both from airstrikes and missile strikes. But I think that people need to understand what a no-fly zone means. It's not some rule you pass that everybody has to oblige by. It's the willingness to shoot down the aircrafts of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III.
So that's why a lot of people, myself included, think a no-fly zone that is going to be managed and controlled and enforced by the U.S. and NATO allies is a bad idea. Peter had the comment, said no-fly zone equals Third World War, nuclear war. That is the sentiment echoed by Marco Rubio, a lot of people on the Republican side of the aisle, as well as myself and pretty much every sane person that I know. However, a poll, again, does show that this is, again, from the Hill, too, so pretty reputable, in my opinion. 74% of Americans, including solid majorities of Republicans and Democrats, think the United States should help with the no-fly zone. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. If you know anything about, if you know anybody who is in support of the United States getting involved militarily and putting troops on the ground or planes in the sky, maybe let them know what the implications of that are, because it's not good. You can be in support and you can feel terrible for the Ukrainian people, which I do. But that doesn't mean you want U.S. troops and U.S. forces on the ground and in the air, or in the sea, depending on the branch. But this is interesting too. We're going to get to this. Here we go. Everybody's complaining about this. Gas prices skyrocketing. That same poll, an equally bipartisan 80% of Americans and said the United States should stop buying Russian oil. Ha! Interesting. I agree. 80% of the Americans say the United States should stop buying Russian oil. The White House on Friday said it was weighing cuts to U.S. imports of Russian oil, though it's proceeding cautiously, concerned about a spike in gasoline prices that would add to inflation. Here's a question. What are gas prices like where you are? I've been in Hawaii for 3 days. In those 3 days, the gas station right around the corner from my house went up 60 cents, which is a lot. 60 cents in 6 days. That's 10 cents a day. You keep going at that rate, I'm going to have to take out a mortgage on my home to buy a freaking tank of gas. But I don't know. Let me know when you're in the comment section. What are gas prices like where you are? Because I would imagine that in a lot of places they're not going down anytime soon. The average price of U.S. gas climbed to $4.07 per gallon Monday, according to AAA. That's roughly 45 cents increase over the last week alone. Holy cow! The national average of gas prices jumped 45 cents in 7 days. That is insane. Let me play this clip from Jen Psaki. So this is just listen to this. This is the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki.
The reason why the price of gas is going up is not because of steps the president has taken. They are because President Putin is invading Ukraine, and that is creating a great deal of instability in the global marketplace.
So that's Jen Psaki saying that the gas prices aren't going up from anything Joe Biden did. They're going up because Putin is invading Ukraine. Here's the thing. You missed all 5 of the steps before that. You missed an entire segment where you guys changed a lot of the oil policy in the United States and then became more dependent on Putin-backed Russian gas. So, if you want to get technical, yeah, gas prices are rising because Putin is going into Ukraine and there's a lot of sanctions levied against Russian oil companies. But at the same time, if the Biden administration didn't put a hammer to all of the oil production inside the United States, we wouldn't have to be buying from Russia in the first place. If they didn't stop oil production here, we wouldn't have to depend on gas from over there and conflict throughout the world. This is not new information. We all have already known this for a long time. The increase in gas prices are now pennies away from the all-time high set in 2008, when the average price hit $4.11 per gallon. The record, which isn't adjusted for inflation, which is that's a whole other thing, could fall in the coming days. We stopped producing oil in the United States of America for the sake of going green. Now, look, I'm all about finding renewable energy sources. That's great. If we could have entirely renewable energy, awesome. I'm all for it. But the amount of oil and the amount of energy we're using doesn't go down in that transitory period. In the period between fossil fuels and entirely renewable energy, which could be 10 years and it could be 100 years. Who knows how long that's going to take. But in the process between fossil fuels and renewable energy, it doesn't mean our consumption of energy goes down. So when you're pushing for renewable energy, you can't just stop the entire process of producing in the United States. You can't stop the process of producing oil in the United States in that process. because our consumption hasn't gone down. The only thing you forced us to do is buy foreign oil, which, as we are seeing right now, is dependent on other world leaders staying sane, which they are not. Yeah, we aren't using any less oil. And look, there's no rule that says we can't be screaming towards renewable energy and also making sure that our national security is protected by producing energy within our own country. Until that renewable energy source is found, or the way to continue going forward with renewable energy, until we're entirely on renewable energy, there's no rule that says we can't continue producing in our own country to protect ourselves from exactly what's happening right now overseas. And this is fascinating too. This is super interesting. So, why did the United States stop producing as much oil as we can in-house and start buying it from other places? Well, a lot of it was because of activists. Activists said, no, we need to produce renewable energy, which is fine. I'm all about clean energy. That sounds like a great thing to have. But in the meantime, all of the activists got the Biden administration and a bunch of your super climate activist-y politicians to say, in the meantime, no oil production here. Okay, well, our consumption didn't change, so that just means we have to go buy it from somewhere else. Guess who funded some of those activists? This is fascinating. In 2014, the same year that Russia annexed Crimea, the North Atlantic NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen warned that Russia was covertly working to undermine European and U.S. fossil fuel production. What they were doing, so check this out. This is a big, long article with a bunch of nuances. The Russians were funding climate change activists to ban fracking and oil production in the United States and in Europe so that the dumb legislatures would ban production of energy and have to buy it from Russia. 3 years later, in 2017, Republican congresspeople from Texas sent a lengthy letter to the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, making a similar accusation. Importantly, their letter connected some of the dots, highlighting Russia's covert efforts to fund various environmental organizations that were trying to limit or end U.S. hydraulic fracturing or fracking for shale gas and oil. The media and Democrats mostly shrugged their shoulders at these allegations. They were far too busy proving the now discredited Russia-Trump election collusion to be bothered with more plausible Russian environmental activist collusion. This is from Merrill Matthews in The Hill. It's an opinion piece. But to lay it out plainly, the Russians wanted to sell oil to the United States of America. They knew not only the United States of America, the Russians wanted to sell more oil to the Western world. In order to do that, they funded activists that promoted the idea, they funded activists that got energy production in the Western world essentially banned. But the consumption didn't go down. Instead, all of those Western countries now have to buy from countries like Russia, which they funded. Russia funded. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm losing my marbles here a little bit. We're getting off the rails and off track just a little bit. But the entire reason that we are buying Russian oil and Russian energy and Russian gas is because the Russians, infiltrated the activist community and funded a bunch of NGOs, governmental organizations, to try and ban energy production in the Western world. And now the Western world is buying oil from them. I feel like a broken record reiterating myself constantly. Tomorrow we've got some interesting stuff. I feel like we covered and hit at a bunch of election stuff in 2020. Obviously, over the last year, it's been a topic of discussion. But there's actually a really interesting report. I think it's out of the Washington Times. It's a Washington Times is covering a lawsuit going on in Wisconsin. We're going to bring a lot of that to you tomorrow. Try and not entirely be fixated on Russia, Ukraine. But we got some election stuff coming up tomorrow that's going to be pretty interesting. Again, I'm not on the train of this big, massive conspiracy to steal an election, partly because I think the people that would have had to be in charge of that sort of thing are not smart enough to pull off a massive conspiracy. But the election, there's some interesting stuff going on with the election of 2020 in Wisconsin, some lawsuits being brought, and that's a fascinating story. We'll have that tomorrow. But that's going to do it for us today. I appreciate you tuning in. Those of you who stuck around the entire show, thank you for doing so. If you haven't, or if you want to catch any part of the show, we had some pretty great clips, especially at the beginning. The Trump, John Daly, golf clubhouse phone call was actually fascinating. So if you need to, go check it out anywhere you listen to podcasts, rewatch on Facebook, all that sort of stuff. Also, if you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media accounts. I'm hilarious, by the way. You will see my ranting and raving about Hawaii. Jeez, you know what? Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. But holy cow, Hawaii is still off the deep end via COVID. You have to wear a mask everywhere, and you have to show definitely 100% totally real, not fake at all COVID tests. But you'll see all that on my social media accounts. So give me a follow at JOBOB. Just type in JOBOB anywhere you go to, anywhere you have a social media account, Getter, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of those. Would really appreciate a follow. Stay connected there. And yeah, we'll talk about election stuff. I want to go on a rant on Hawaii tomorrow because that was an insane experience. It was great. It was beautiful. The island was fantastic. Had a great time with my wife and a couple friends. But the COVID protocols there are crazy. That's going to do it for us today. We will see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. See you then. Have a great rest of your Monday. God bless America.